Prophecies unfolding in Palestine. The signs are now clear. The morning sun rose slowly over the hills of Jerusalem, spreading a warm, golden light across the ancient city. The air was calm, but heavy with a strange tension, as if the land itself was waiting for something unseen. The streets of the old city were alive with the usual rhythm of merchants calling out to buyers and children running through narrow alleys, but beneath the surface there was a quiet unease. Rumors had begun to spread across the region about strange signs appearing in the sky and sudden changes in the weather. Some said they were nothing more than coincidences, but others whispered that the old prophecies were starting to come. True, in a small village outside Ramallah, a young journalist named Amir sat on the rooftop of his house with his camera, pointed toward the horizon. He had been following the stories of these signs for months, traveling across towns and refugee camps to capture the truth. Amir was not a religious man, but he had grown up hearing the verses from his grandmother, who would often recite ancient prophecies about the final days. She used to say that the land of Palestine would be the stage where the truth and falsehood would collide before the end of time. At first, he thought of them as mere tales to scare children, but now he was beginning to question everything. Amir's friend Youssef joined him on the rooftop, carrying 2 cups of tea. He placed one beside Amir and said, "You have not slept again, have you?" Amir smiled faintly and replied, "How can I sleep when the world feels like it is shifting under our feet yesterday?" In Hebron, people said they saw a light over the dome of the rock, and it stayed there for 10 minutes before fading without a sound. Youssef sat beside him, staring into the distance, and said, "Maybe it was just a drone or some military experiment." But Amir shook his head. "I have seen the footage. It was not man-made. It was bright, pure light, without any smoke or sound. Down below in the village, the mosque loudspeakers echoed with the call to prayer. The sound carried across the valley, mixing with the chirping of birds and the rustle of olive trees. Amir and Youssef stood up and walked down the narrow staircase to join the people gathering for prayer. The Imam spoke afterward, his voice trembling slightly as he addressed the crowd. He reminded them of the old prophecies mentioned in the Hadith about the signs of the final age. He said that oppression would spread across the earth, and that truth would be silenced while injustice would be praised. Many listened with fear, while others dismissed his words as exaggeration. After the prayer, Amir spoke with the Imam privately. The Imam was an elderly man named Sheikh Nidal, known for his deep knowledge of history and religion. Amir asked him if he believed the signs were real. The Sheikh looked at him thoughtfully and said, "My son, every generation believes they are living in the time of signs, but rarely do they look at the world with eyes of truth. Yet what is happening now feels different. The land is trembling, the skies are restless, and the hearts of people are filled with both fear and awakening. The prophecies are not only about destruction, they are also about revelation." Later that day, Amir traveled to Jerusalem to meet a professor of theology who had recently written a paper on prophetic predictions related to the Middle East. The professor, named Dr. Elias, was a calm man who spoke with measured wisdom. He welcomed Amir into his office at the Hebrew University and offered him a seat surrounded by shelves full of old manuscripts. Amir began recording as Dr. Elias explained how ancient texts from various faiths all seemed to point toward the same region when describing the final era. The professor said, from the scriptures of Islam to the prophecies in the Old Testament and even certain Christian traditions, all eyes turn to this land. When history repeats itself here, it is never coincidence, it is divine. Amir asked him, "Do you think what is happening now could be the beginning of something bigger?" The professor smiled gently and said, "Perhaps it is not the beginning, but the unfolding. Signs never come all at once. They appear like pieces of a puzzle, only visible to those who watch carefully." That night, Amir stayed in Jerusalem. He wandered through the quiet streets near Al-Aqsa, where soldiers stood guard at every corner. The scent of freshly baked bread filled the air from nearby shops, but tension lingered in the silence between footsteps. He looked up at the night sky and felt an unexplainable pull in his chest, as if the heavens were calling him to witness something. Suddenly a sound echoed from afar, a deep rumble that made the ground tremble slightly. People stepped out of their homes, looking around in confusion. It was not an earthquake, but the vibration of something powerful moving through the earth. Moments later, flashes of light appeared beyond the eastern horizon. They were not fireworks nor lightning. They moved in formation slow and deliberate, glowing white and gold. The soldiers aimed their weapons toward the sky, shouting commands. Amir instinctively lifted his camera and began recording. The lights formed a pattern for a brief moment, then vanished into the clouds, leaving behind a strange stillness. By morning, the footage was spreading rapidly across social media. News channels debated whether it was a military exercise or a celestial event. Religious scholars began quoting verses about signs in the heavens and the awakening of nations. Governments released statements denying any military involvement. Yet people in Gaza, Bethlehem, and Jericho all claimed to have seen the same lights. Amir became the center of attention as his video gained millions of views. He was invited for interviews, but he avoided fame and continued searching for answers. He traveled south toward Hebron, where reports had emerged of an old cave discovered beneath the ruins of an ancient mosque. Local villagers claimed that the cave walls were covered with inscriptions, glowing faintly at night. When Amir arrived, the area was crowded with soldiers and archaeologists. He managed to sneak inside with Youssef using their press credentials. Inside the cave, the air was cool and heavy with dust. Faint carvings covered the stone walls. Some were in Arabic, while others appeared in older languages that even the experts could not fully translate. In the center of the cave, there was a circular stone tablet with a single line engraved across it. The translation read, "The end will begin where the truth was buried." Amir touched the stone gently and felt a slight vibration beneath his fingers. The archaeologists were arguing among themselves about whether it was authentic or a modern fabrication. But deep inside, Amir felt something stir, as if the stone was speaking directly to his soul. That night, he wrote in his journal, "The land speaks through its silence. Every sign is a reminder that truth cannot remain hidden forever. The more they try to bury it, the louder it echoes from beneath the soil." As the days passed, strange occurrences increased across the region. Birds migrated out of season, rivers turned red for a few hours before clearing again, and a faint tremor shook the Dead Sea twice within a week. People began to panic, while others gathered in prayer. Prophets of doom appeared on every channel, claiming to have foreseen this moment. Amid the chaos, Amir received an anonymous message on his phone. It contained only one line written in Arabic: "Seek the Valley of Fire before it is sealed." He showed it to Youssef, who thought it was a prank, but Amir felt otherwise. He searched for references to the Valley of Fire and found a few mentions in old maps describing a remote area near the Jordan border known for volcanic activity centuries ago. Determined to uncover the truth, he packed his camera gear and told Youssef they would leave at dawn. As the sun rose once again over the Holy Land, Amir looked out at the horizon from the moving car. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on him, as if every mountain and stone was alive with memory. The wind carried whispers that only his heart could understand. Somewhere deep inside, he knew the signs were not random, they were. Warnings written by time itself, waiting for the chosen eyes to read them. He turned to Youssef and said, "Whatever happens next, remember, this is not just about faith or science. It is about truth, and the truth is unfolding before us now." Their car disappeared into the rising dust of the desert road as the first rays of light touched the hills of Palestine, and the world unknowingly stepped closer to the revelation that had been foretold for centuries. Prophecies unfolding in Palestine. The signs are now clear. The journey toward the Valley of Fire began before sunrise. Amir and Youssef drove in silence through winding desert roads surrounded by endless stretches of dry hills. The air was heavy with dust, and the faint scent of salt carried from the Dead Sea. Amir gripped the steering wheel tightly, his eyes fixed on the horizon. His thoughts were racing as he remembered the strange message that had brought them here. He did not know who sent it or how they knew about the signs, but something deep inside him urged him to follow. Hours passed, and the landscape became more barren. The villages grew smaller until only scattered tents and stone houses appeared along the way. Occasionally they passed groups of shepherds, leading flocks across the cracked earth, their faces weathered by the sun. At last they reached a small checkpoint, guarded by a few local police. When Amir told them they were journalists, the officer frowned and said there is nothing here but ruins and danger. The ground sometimes burns at night. People say the valley breathes fire from below. Ignoring the warning, they continued driving until the road ended near a narrow canyon. The entrance was surrounded by blackened rocks, as if scorched by ancient flames. The place felt otherworldly silent, except for the wind whistling through the cracks. Yusef looked uneasy and said maybe we should turn back, but Amir stepped forward with determination and replied, "We came this far, we must see what is hidden here." They walked into the canyon carrying only a flashlight and camera. The walls glowed faintly under the sunlight, revealing strange markings similar to those found in the cave at Hebron. The deeper they went, the darker it became, until only their flashlight cut through the gloom. The sound of dripping water echoed around them, though no stream was visible. After an hour, they reached an open chamber where the ground was cracked and warm beneath their feet. In the center of the chamber stood a tall stone pillar, half buried in the ground. It was engraved with words that neither of them could fully understand, but Amir could recognize fragments of Arabic mixed with ancient Syriac. He began filming while Yusef examined the carvings. Suddenly the air grew thick with a deep humming sound that seemed to come from within the pillar itself. Amir stepped back as faint light began to pulse through the cracks in the stone. Then the ground trembled and dust fell from the ceiling. Yusef shouted, "We need to get out." But before they could move, the pillar cracked open, revealing a hollow core that glowed with golden light. Within the light, a faint symbol appeared, resembling a flame surrounded by a circle. The humming stopped, and silence returned. Amir stared at the symbol, mesmerized, and whispered, "This is what the message meant, the Valley of Fire." They left the chamber and hurried back to their vehicle, but as they reached the surface, they found 3 black vehicles waiting for them. Armed men stepped out, their faces hidden behind masks. One of them called out, "You should not have come here." Amir tried to explain they were journalists, but the man interrupted, "We know who you are and what you have seen. You will come with us." The men took their cameras and blindfolded them before forcing them into a vehicle. For hours they were driven through the desert without knowing where they were headed. When the blindfolds were finally removed, they found themselves in an underground facility lit by bright white lights. A man in a suit approached them, his tone calm but cold. He said, "My name is Colonel Rafik. You have entered a restricted site. What you witnessed in the valley is classified." Amir demanded to know what the pillar was, but the colonel only replied that it was an ancient geological anomaly under scientific study. Yet Amir noticed hesitation in his voice, as if he was hiding something. He said, "We have records of similar symbols found beneath other sites across the region, even in Jerusalem. They are not man-made. We are still trying to understand their origin." After hours of questioning, the 2 were released but warned not to share any footage. Their cameras were returned, but all recordings of the glowing pillar were erased. When they reached a nearby town, Yusef insisted they should stop before they got killed, but Amir refused. He said if they tried to silence us, it means we found something real. The truth cannot be erased forever. That night, Amir contacted Dr. Elias in Jerusalem and described what had happened. The professor listened carefully, then said, "There are ancient texts that speak of pillars of light buried beneath sacred lands. They are said to awaken when the time of revelation draws near. "You must be careful, Amir. There are powers both seen and unseen that do not wish these secrets to be uncovered." Meanwhile, across Palestine, strange events continued. The Jordan River began to dry faster than ever before. A blood-red moon appeared over Gaza, and flocks of birds flew in spirals above the Al-Aqsa compound for 3 nights. People gathered in prayer, fearing that these were the final signs foretold by prophets. Governments struggled to maintain order, as protests erupted, demanding answers for the unexplained occurrences. Amir and Yusuf traveled north toward Nablus, where reports surfaced of another ancient site uncovered after a landslide. There they met a group of villagers who claimed to have found inscriptions similar to the ones seen before, but this time they contained a full verse. The translation read, "When the earth will speak and reveal the truth hidden beneath the dust of centuries, then shall the eyes of men be opened." Amir recorded everything and uploaded his findings to encrypted servers. Within days, his investigation went viral across the Arab world and beyond. Some called him a hero, while others accused him of spreading fear. Religious leaders debated on live television about the meaning of the signs, while scientists argued they were natural phenomena. Yet deep in his heart, Amir felt the pattern was too perfect to be random. One evening, as he sat in his hotel room writing notes, he received another anonymous message. It read, "You are not alone. They have awakened the guardians." He stared at the screen, confused, wondering if it was another warning or something else. A few minutes later, there was a knock on the door. Yusuf opened it and found an old man standing there dressed in a white robe with piercing eyes. He introduced himself as Idris and said, "I have been waiting for you." They invited him inside, and he spoke slowly with an air of great wisdom. He said, "I am from a lineage of keepers who have protected the ancient knowledge buried within this land. The signs you see are not random. They are messages written by time itself. Long before the empires and wars, this land was chosen as the meeting point of heaven and earth. Every prophecy ever spoken finds its echo here." Amir asked him what the pillars meant. Idris replied, "They are markers left by the first believers who knew the truth of the coming age. When they awaken, the veil between worlds will begin to thin. You have already seen it, the lights in the sky, the trembling ground, the burning valley. All are signs that the hidden order is shifting." Before they could ask more, the old man handed Amir a small parchment sealed with wax. He said, "Take this to the Mount of Olives when the next sign appears. There you will understand your purpose." Then without another word, he left, disappearing into the night. Days later, heavy storms swept across the region, flooding parts of the West Bank and cutting off communication lines. The sky turned a strange copper color at sunset, and people claimed to hear distant voices carried by the wind. In the chaos, Amir held the parchment tightly, unsure what awaited him next. When he finally broke the seal, inside was a single phrase written in ancient calligraphy: "The final witness will rise from the land of truth." As he read the words, lightning struck the hills nearby, and the power went out across the city. Yusuf shouted from the window, calling him to look outside. Through the rain and darkness, they saw a column of light descending over Jerusalem, brighter than anything they had ever seen before. It stretched from the sky to the ground, illuminating the dome of the rock like a beacon. Amir's heart raced as he realized the next prophecy was beginning. Without hesitation, he grabbed his camera and whispered to Yusuf, "It is time we go to the Mount of Olives. The truth is no longer waiting. It is calling us now." They stepped out into the storm as thunder echoed across the ancient hills, and the signs of destiny began to unfold before their eyes. Prophecies unfolding in Palestine. The signs are now clear. The storm raged across the hills as Amir and Yusuf drove toward Jerusalem, the wind howling against their car and flashes of lightning lighting up the road ahead. The rain fell so heavily that it blurred their vision, but Amir refused to slow down. His mind was fixed on the Mount of Olives and the parchment that the old man Idris had given him. The words echoed in his head again and again. The final witness will rise from the land of truth. He did not yet understand what it meant, but every part of his soul told him this was the moment he had been destined to face. When they reached the outskirts of the city, the streets were flooded, and soldiers stood on alert trying to control the chaos. People were gathered outside mosques and churches praying in fear and hope. Amir parked near the old city and continued on foot with Youssef carrying their camera equipment through the pouring rain. The sky was alive with strange light that pulsed like fire behind the clouds. They climbed the steep path leading to the Mount of Olives, their clothes soaked and faces pale from exhaustion. As they neared the top, Amir noticed a faint glow ahead just beyond the olive trees. When they reached it, they found a circle of stones, surrounding a patch of dry ground untouched by the rain. In the center stood the same symbol they had seen in the Valley of Fire, the circle with the flame. Amir knelt beside it and placed the parchment on the ground. The wind suddenly stopped and the air became still. The parchment began to shimmer, as if responding to an unseen force. Then words appeared on its surface, glowing softly in golden light. They read, "When the witness stands before the flame, the earth shall speak, and the truth shall no longer hide beneath the dust." Amir and Youssef stared in silence as the ground beneath the circle trembled. The stones around it began to move slightly, forming a pattern like a spiral. From deep within the earth came a low humming sound that grew louder with each second. Then, without warning, the ground cracked open, revealing a narrow tunnel descending into the darkness below. Youssef hesitated, but Amir whispered, "This is it, the truth is calling us." He took a deep breath and stepped inside, followed by Youssef. The air was cool and damp, and the faint sound of dripping water echoed around them. Their flashlight beams danced across the ancient walls, covered with carvings and inscriptions from different eras of history. It was as if every civilization had left its mark here. After walking for several minutes, they reached a vast underground chamber. In the center stood a massive stone archway covered in strange symbols that glowed faintly with blue light. The air around it vibrated with energy. On the ground near the archway lay several broken tablets and old scrolls preserved in the dry air. Amir picked one up carefully and read the writing aloud. It spoke of a time when the world would be divided between light and shadow, and that a chosen witness would awaken the truth buried within the sacred land. As he finished, reading, the archway began to emit a low tone, and beams of light formed between its pillars, creating a shape like a doorway. Amir stepped closer, feeling warmth radiate from it. Youssef tried to stop him, but Amir said, "I have to see what lies beyond this is what we have been searching for." He reached out his hand and touched the light. For a moment his vision blurred and everything went silent. When he opened his eyes, he found himself standing in a vast plain, bathed in golden light. The air was calm and filled with a strange melody that seemed to come from everywhere. Before him stood a figure dressed in white, whose face was hidden by a radiant glow. The figure spoke in a voice that resonated deep within his soul. "The time of veiled truth is ending. The world has forgotten the covenant written in the heart of this land. You have been chosen to bear witness so that mankind may remember." Amir fell to his knees, overcome with awe and fear. He asked, "Why me? I am only a man with a camera, not a prophet, not a scholar." The figure replied, "Because truth does not choose by knowledge, but by sincerity. You have sought it with a pure heart, and for that reason you were guided here." The figure raised its hand, and light surrounded Amir, filling him with warmth. Visions flashed before his eyes, scenes of wars, cities in ruins, people crying for mercy, and others rising in unity to rebuild. Then the light faded, and the voice said, "Remember what you have seen, for soon the world will demand the truth, and you will speak it." When Amir opened his eyes again, he was lying on the floor of the chamber with Youssef shaking him awake. The archway had gone dark, and the air was still. He sat up, gasping for breath, his heart pounding. Yusef asked what happened, where did you go? But Amir could not fully explain. He simply said, I saw the truth, and it is near. They left the tunnel and climbed back to the surface. The storm had ended, and the first light of dawn spread across the horizon. The city below was quiet, as if holding its breath after a long night of fear. Birds began to sing softly among the olive trees. Amir looked toward the dome of the rock shining under the morning sun and whispered, everything begins here. Over the following days, Amir began to experience strange visions in his sleep. He saw rivers flowing backward, deserts blooming with green light, and cities submerged in silence. Each dream felt more vivid than the last, and each morning he woke with new understanding of the prophecies he had once dismissed as legends. He wrote everything down, filling pages with symbols and words that he did not even recognize. Meanwhile, the world outside grew restless. Earthquakes shook regions near the Mediterranean. News channels reported that ancient ruins were surfacing from beneath the Dead Sea as the water level dropped to record lows. Scientists could not explain it. Religious leaders from different faiths called for unity, while politicians prepared for conflict. Amid the uncertainty, Amir's name appeared everywhere. His footage from the valley and the lights over Jerusalem had become symbols of hope and fear. One evening, as he sat by his window in Ramallah, he received another message on his phone. It said, they know what you saw. They will come for you. The truth must be protected until the final sign appears. His heart raced as he looked out into the street and saw a black vehicle parked nearby. Yusef entered the room and said, we have to leave now, they are watching the house. They packed quickly and escaped through the back alley, heading toward the hills. For 2 days, they traveled in secret, staying in abandoned houses and moving only at night. On the 3rd night, they reached an old monastery near Jericho, where monks offered them shelter. One of the monks, a quiet man named Father Elias, recognized Amir and said, we have been waiting for you. The signs written in the old texts spoke of a seeker of truth who would come when the heavens burn above Jerusalem. He led them to a hidden chamber beneath the monastery where an ancient map was carved into the wall. It showed markings stretching from Jerusalem to the Dead Sea and ending in a place labeled the Gate of Dust. Father Elias said, according to prophecy, when the witness finds the Gate of Dust, the earth will speak its final secret. No one knows what lies there, but the path is dangerous and guarded by those who wish to keep the truth buried. Amir looked at the map and felt the same pull he had felt before. Every sign, every message had led him here. He turned to Yusef and said, this is where we must go next. The truth will not wait any longer. That night, as they prepared to leave, a faint tremor shook the monastery walls, and a distant light appeared over the horizon, glowing like a rising flame. The monks knelt in prayer, whispering verses about the awakening of the earth. Amir looked at the light and said softly, this is the 3rd sign. The world is changing before our eyes. He closed his eyes for a moment and felt the same warmth that had touched him in the chamber beneath the mountain. Deep inside, he knew the next journey would reveal not just the secret of the land, but the destiny of all who lived upon it. Prophecies unfolding in Palestine. The signs are now clear. The journey to the Gate of Dust began under the dim light of dawn as Amir and Yusef left the monastery behind and moved deeper into the wilderness near the Dead Sea. The land stretched endlessly before them, dry, cracked, and silent as if holding its breath. The faint wind carried the scent of salt and old earth. Amir held the ancient map carved into parchment given by Father Elias, his eyes scanning the faded markings that led them toward a forgotten valley hidden between 2 mountains. Each step felt heavier than the last, but something within him kept pushing forward, a force stronger than fear. For 2 days, they walked under the burning sun, resting only when the heat became unbearable. On the 3rd evening, the desert air turned cold, and the sky above them glowed faintly with strange lights, moving like waves. They stopped to rest near a group of stones arranged in a circle, similar to those they had seen before. Yusef stared at the sky and said, "I do not know if I believe in miracles anymore, but everything we have seen feels beyond reason." Amir replied, "Perhaps reason was never meant to explain what belongs to truth." As night fell, they lit a small fire to keep warm. In the silence, Amir opened his journal, filled with notes and symbols drawn from his visions. Among the pages, one phrase appeared repeatedly, though he did not remember writing it: "The earth remembers everything." He closed the book and looked toward the horizon, where faint flashes of light appeared in the distance. The air seemed to hum with energy, and he knew they were close. By morning, they reached the edge of a canyon wider and deeper than anything they had seen. The ground shimmered as if dust and light were dancing together. At the center stood a massive stone gate carved into the wall of the canyon, its surface covered in ancient writing. The words seemed to shift and glow faintly under the sunlight. Amir approached slowly and felt a wave of energy radiating from it. The air around the gate vibrated like a living thing. Yusef whispered, "This must be the gate of dust." Amir nodded and said, "This is where the truth speaks." He placed his hand against the stone, and instantly a deep sound echoed through the canyon, like the beating of a giant heart. The ground began to tremble, and fine dust rose into the air, forming shapes and patterns that twisted above their heads. Then a voice unlike any human voice filled the space around them, deep, calm, and ancient. It said, "The time of silence has ended. The earth shall now bear witness to what was hidden." The dust parted, revealing a passage beyond the gate, glowing with soft golden light. Without hesitation, Amir stepped inside, followed closely by Yusef. The tunnel walls were smooth and seemed to breathe as they moved deeper. Strange symbols glowed faintly, illuminating their path. After walking for several minutes, they entered a vast underground hall. In the center stood a great stone altar surrounded by water that shimmered with light. On the altar lay an ancient scroll, sealed with a mark identical to the one that had appeared on the pillar in the Valley of Fire. Amir approached the altar slowly, his footsteps echoing in the chamber. When he reached the scroll, the air became still. He looked at Yusef, who nodded silently. Amir broke the seal and unrolled the scroll. Inside were lines written in a language older than any he had seen, but somehow he understood them, as if they were being spoken directly into his mind. The words said, "When men turn away from truth and the earth is filled with blood and sorrow, the land of revelation shall awaken. The witness shall rise and speak the final truth to the nations, and the world shall know that the covenant of light was never broken." As he read those words, the chamber began to shake. The water around the altar rippled, and beams of light rose from it, touching the ceiling. The sound of rushing wind filled the air, though there was no breeze. Amir felt his heart race and his vision blur. Images appeared before him, showing the past and future intertwined. Ancient prophets walking the same land, armies marching across, desert cities rebuilt after destruction, and people from every nation gathering in unity. Under one sky, the voice returned again and said, "Remember what you have seen, for this is not the end, but the awakening. Truth cannot be destroyed, only forgotten, and you have been chosen to remind the world." The light grew brighter until Amir could no longer see. Then everything went silent. When he opened his eyes, he was lying on the desert floor near the canyon entrance. The gate behind him was gone, only smooth stone remained. Yusef was beside him, unconscious but breathing. The sun was high above, and the air was calm. It was as if the storm, the trembling, and the lights had never happened. Amir sat up slowly, still holding the scroll, now blank, except for one line written in his own handwriting: "The truth lives in those who remember." They returned to Jerusalem days later, exhausted and silent. The city was tense, yet strangely peaceful. People whispered about the recent storms that had stopped suddenly, and the lights that had vanished from the sky. Scientists could not explain it, and the governments issued no statements. Amir and Yusef met with Dr. Elias once more, who listened to their story in silence. When they finished, he said, "I believe you. The world may not yet be ready to understand, but your journey was meant to happen. You have seen what others cannot. Amir decided to compile all his recordings, writings and findings into one documentary, not as proof, but as testimony. He titled it The Land That Speaks. Within days, it spread across the world, sparking debates, discussions and movements for peace. Some called him a visionary, others called him mad, but deep inside he knew that the truth he carried was not meant for fame, it was meant to awaken hearts. One evening he returned alone to the Mount of Olives. The sun was setting over the golden city, bathing the land in a warm glow. He sat beneath an olive tree and watched the light fade. The air was calm and filled with a sense of quiet fulfillment. He whispered to himself, the signs were never about destruction, they were about remembrance. When the earth speaks, it reminds us of who we are and what we were created for. A gentle wind blew across the hills, carrying with it the scent of olive and dust. Amir closed his eyes, and for a brief moment he heard the same voice that had guided him since the beginning whisper, "You have done what was written." The truth is clear. The land rests. As darkness covered the city, the stars above shone brighter than ever before, as if the heavens themselves were watching in peace. The prophecies had unfolded, and the witness had spoken. What remained now was the awakening of those who would listen.